healthy. This is going to be very light presentation, technical. So today we're going to talk about core Agile methodologies, have an overview and talk about drawbacks and advantages. So we're going to start with Scrum, then Kanban, then extreme programming, and end with feature-driven development. So Scrum, I'm a Scrum Master, so I'm a little bit biased here. So Scrum is a framework that roots actually to the late 80s. It was inspired by two Japanese men, Nonaka-san and Takoichi-san, in the new development game. It's a journal was published in Harvard Business Review, and that's where the first time Scrum was mentioned. So Scrum, one of the main aspects of it is the divide and conquer approach. It's dividing the workflow to easily manageable workloads. So the first part is to have sprints. Sprint is a time unit, it's a time box. It should be short, so from 1 week to up to 4 weeks, depending on the team. I think in Japan, many teams have 1 week. In my team, it's 2 weeks.
Sorry, yes? Teams are how big?
So teams members from 3 to 9 members only. So Scrum wants teams to be small enough. We'll see why it's for communication and transparency purpose. So out of focus. So to divide the workload, it should be in features. So the Scrum team is constituted of a product owner. He's the business person, the one who has the vision for the product, and he will translate that vision into tasks. And then we have the Scrum Master, the one who makes sure that the Scrum framework is emphasized, and the developers. So the product owner will have his own product backlog, more like a features list, user stories. So a template of user story will be like, why or what is this function? So as a role or persona person, I want something to do something else. And the product owner provides acceptance criteria. I think in Japanese, Okeiri Kijun. I'm not very good at Japanese, but I think that's what they call it. And it's like the passing test for the product owner to accept this feature to be shippable. And then what the developers do is they will take these features, they will decide which features to bring to work on. So it's a pull system, not a push. So the product owner cannot impose on developers to say, okay, you have a deadline, this month I want these features. He cannot do that. The team decides what they can do depending on their capacity. So they will take these features and divide them even smaller to tasks, sprint backlog items. And at the end of the sprint, there will be we should get a potentially shippable product or prototype. So at the end of the sprint, we'll get a sprint review where the product owner and other stakeholders or anybody interested to see the progress of the product can attend, and there will be like small demonstration of the prototype, which brings us to the next point. That Scrum emphasizes continuous feedback. So these short loops, they will emphasize the short. Do you know, like in the market, there's always changing circumstances, exterior effects, and all that should be always affect the product development. So this is one of my funniest pictures, but it's a bit blurry. So here the difference between how a customer, for example, describe, and then what developers are actually doing, and how the different wrong communication that's going on between the different team members. You can find later the sources of this picture. And of course, continuous feedback, this tight loop, will lead to continuous improvement, Kaizen. Because I think that's what every company wants, finally, an optimized value product. Scrum emphasizes on transparency. Transparency is one of the most pillars. So the transparency, adoption, and inspection. Transparency, first, there's the daily Scrum meetings. This like daily stand-ups where developers ask like mainly 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And what are the problems that you encountered? It's kind of a mini replanning event. It's not where you solve the problem. It's where you be open and courage to say, I had a problem in my work. And Scrum, he doesn't show you as a framework, doesn't tell you how to solve problems. It helps you to make these problems visible. And the team will actually solve its own problems depending on the circumstances. And in this daily Scrum, you could see the workloads between different team members. So you could see their work, very visible and transparent. But it doesn't mean that it's individually owned. Still, the team own the whole project, and the whole team should work as a unit to achieve what we call a sprint goal. So it doesn't matter if you do this task or the other task, it's team owned. So everybody should be usually have cross-functional skills. Everybody should help each other to achieve that goal for the best of the product. So one of the Scrum drawbacks is there is no definite end date. There is, because we mentioned, no deadlines. So, but what happens here in Scrum, because stakeholders don't like this, the going on the loose and yes, we will do it maybe. They don't like the maybes, they want specific dates. So in Scrum we have something called velocity, is the speed of the team. It cannot be compared between different teams. So usually when we estimate the user stories, we give points. It depends from one team to another. And the velocity is how many points or how much effort, more generally, can you do in one time unit, in one sprint. And from one sprint to another, velocity varies because, life happens, bugs happens, many things happen. So velocity is not always constant, but it should be conversion to constant number, which is a sustainable pace. So that's Scrum's way to try to solve this, to give an approximate way to get approximate delivery date. It's challenging for large teams because teams should be from 3 to 9 members. Scrum doesn't advise more than that. And I think that's because of they want to keep communication flow easy. Because the bigger the team, the harder you try to communicate from different members. And that's where we will come the scaling agile frameworks. And meetings frequency. Some developers complain about why we have to do meeting every day, why we have to do 2 hours meeting at the sprint review. So many developers complain about the meeting frequency and the length. Because we all get bored after lunch, I guess. Everybody wants to sleep. But Scrum, for example, for daily Scrum, daily stand-up event, it says it's maximum 15 minutes. And it shouldn't move more than that time. And actually in real life, if you really practice it, as the Scrum guide says, it can even be much less than 15 minutes. Next, we go to Kanban. Kanban, I think a Japanese word for signboard. It's inspired from the Toyota production system. So Kanban is very easy. It's a whiteboard with sticky notes. Sticky notes are the tasks, and you just move them around, shift them between to do and work in progress doing. We have also review, but basically you can even just keep the done from it. So the first important feature of Kanban is to limit the work in progress. For example, you cannot have two tasks more than that. And I think this makes sense. Why? Because if you will have so many tasks in progress that maybe at the end of the sprint you wouldn't actually finish none of them and you wouldn't be able to deliver anything. Imagine like someone going into a sushi restaurant, ordering sushi, and then you get only the rice. Like, where is the sashimi? I'm a customer. This is not. So that's what may happen. That's why there's a limit for that. Just the customer at the end, he doesn't care if you did that component or you refactored that component, just want what they want. They want the product itself. It's very simple and easy to understand, so it doesn't actually require the training budget for the team. You don't have to bring coaches and trainers and all that commercialized things. And it's very visualized process. It's there, you get to see it. You don't need the online tools for the whiteboard. Though now I think many teams use online tools. So the drawbacks. So there's a productivity issue because many people are procrastinators, which means they will keep, if there is no time pressure on them, they will keep delaying the tasks, and that will result in productivity issue. It's also difficult to apply if the many tasks are interrelated in a system. So if they're like dependencies, you cannot finish this task unless this task is finished by someone else. So if it's a big feature, then it becomes harder to handle. Quality assurance, because for example, if the task is done and the customer is unsatisfied, then you will have to redo it again and go back to the whole process from the beginning. That would be like waste of time and waste of resources. Next, we go to extreme programming. Anybody familiar with extreme programming? Nice. So extreme programming, I think it's originated from 1990s, late 90s. It's a framework for highly dynamic environments where the environment is rapidly changing and the customer requirements always change. And the customer is also highly available. So extreme programming has 12 practices, which can be divided into 4 pillars. First is fine scale feedback, practices like pair programming, planning game. Planning game, it's like more is release planning, which is when the customer tells you what he exactly wants to developers, those features, and then iteration planning, when the developers decide the tasks that will how to do it. Test-driven development, I think very popular in Japan. Whole team concept, because in extreme programming, the customer is a member of the team. He is not just available to the team, he is also a member of the team. So the whole team doesn't only include tech persons. Continuous process, yeah, we have continuous integration, incremental design, and always having small releases. There's a shared understanding, coding standards. So for example, in my team, having a coding standards document is good if you have someone new coming into the team. But what we noticed is we don't update it and we don't actually check it after a while. So it become outdated and nobody actually come in the morning and say, oh, today I'm gonna check the coding standards. So what I noticed is more efficient is to have third-party libraries. For example, in iOS Swift, I use SwiftLint library, if you're familiar, because if you're gonna make a mistake or something's gonna warning show up, so you have to rectify it. It's like something behind your shoulder, don't do this, don't do this. I think that's much more efficient to see if something went wrong. Collective code ownership, simple design, and system metaphor. System metaphor because the whole team also have business people. There's should be an agreement not to use any technical jargon. So those terms that developers usually use or very easy for us to understand, it may be difficulty to communicate with a customer or a business person. So the agreement is not to use those technical jargons. And last but not least, programmer welfare. So programmers' work should be limited to 40 hours a week to prevent any burn down and keeping a sustainable pace. And I think here is a similar idea to velocity in Scrum. So not to push anybody. If you have specific capacity, you keep at that specific, not to be pushed more than that. So the good thing is in extreme programming is that customer is a team member. He's highly available. The development cycles are short, so feedback loop is tight. It creates highly collaborative teams from different skills and different domains. One of the drawbacks is, I don't know if you're familiar with the Yagni approach, you aren't gonna need it. So extreme programming is focused, you need this feature now, you do it now. You don't need it, then maybe you will not need it in the future. And I think this is a negative point because this may result in technical debt. So you think like some people maybe wouldn't think about scalability later or other evolvement of dependencies. So they're just like, okay, I will not code this. But then in the future, there will be a lot of refactoring that needs to be done and keep the product maintained. And that will need, of course, will be at the expense of the customer. So one time I was thinking like, why we do refactoring? What's the benefit for the customer that I do refactoring? Because refactoring of the code, I thought it's not visible for the customer. He just see what we call the front end. But actually, if the refactoring takes more time, then the project takes more time. Then actually the business people then gonna make the cost higher. And make the cost higher for a customer is not gonna make the customer happy after all. So you wanna keep everything low as a cost. There is no flexibility because to call yourself you're doing extreme programming, you have to stick to all these practices. And it's too code centric, meaning that the design is not the primary focus in extreme programming. Still have time?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So next, feature-driven development, FDD. So between us, at first I thought FDD means food-driven development. And I think someone should write a research paper about that. So feature, as it's in the name, is the cornerstone of this approach. It was firstly introduced in a book called Java Modeling with Colors in UML, in Colors with UML by Jeff DeLuca. And that was the first time this concept was introduced. So there are like mainly 5 activities. First activity is to develop an overall model. So here the team will try to understand the domain problems and they try to make small models for each domain problem. Then They will try to merge and combine those models. Then they will build a features list. So for each business activity, there will be a categorized feature list. And features will be on the form of action, result, and object. For example, calculate customer's negative balance. So calculate will be the action, negative balance is the result, and the object is the customer. So it's related to the customer. And also, then the third activity is plan by feature. So basically in this step, it's who does what. So it's assigning the features. And the last two activities are iterative, and they take 75% of the time of the life cycle of the project. So the first one, design by feature. So the developers will have a design package for each feature. And then the chief programmer will approve those designs, and he will also create diagrams for each feature. And there will be an inspection, design inspection for each feature after this step. Following that is the actual coding, build by feature. So in FDD, the code is individually owned, which means every person is responsible for its own class of code, and that's where it happens. And at the end, I think after it passes, there are like strict rules about passing unit tests. And if everything goes fine, the build will be merged. So, of course, it's a feature-centric process, which means you will always have product increments, which is offer values better than the previous version. There's a focus on quality during all phases of development. There's inspections and tests. It's good for larger scale products requiring constant updating because it's like regular builds. Drawbacks, it cannot be used for smaller projects with strict deadlines. It needs team members who are experts in designing and modeling fields. It does not provide any guidance about requirement gathering, requirement analysis, and risk management. So, as a rough conclusion, Scrum is great for rather smaller teams working on the continuous development and implementation of new features for a long-standing product. Kanban can be good for event-stimulated projects like for customer supports, and it can be good also with on top of another framework like Scrum. Extreme programming can be good for prototyping a technology or for research projects where the resultant work is not the software product itself, but domain knowledge. FDD is good for large teams of developers working on constantly improving the performance of an integrated product. So there are like many common points between all the frameworks, and what everybody says, this is a product-centric for the customer, and this is the base framework. But I think it depends on the team. It depends on the willingness of the organization to adapt a framework and change on it. It depends on the skills. So it has many factors. So I'm very curious to hear if anybody has any experience with these frameworks. So thank you for listening.
So what do you suggest for any team who hasn't done Agile before, would be the first, let's say, technique to try, methodology to try when they get started?
I would vote for Scrum.
Because you're Scrum Master?
No, not because of that. Because my first experience with Scrum is actually first time we weren't actually doing any specific framework. Everybody just doing anything they want, kind of.
Yeah.
We were just doing something for the website. And then they said, oh, we're gonna do Scrum. What is this Scrum? Something famous. Apparently everybody does it, all companies does it, then we have to do it. But actually we weren't rightly informed or how these things go. So we just started with rules. And you know when you're like on the loose and then someone said, oh, you do this, time box. As a developer, we didn't really understand what's going on. But then with time, you understand if someone, what I think is if someone takes the time to explain for you why we do this, the why question, not just do it because I'm your manager and I told you to do this framework. I think you get to understand because Scrum, yes, it's important about keeping time and everything, but I think you can, as a developer, I used to get so bored in meetings. Like, they're very long, I feel information is redundant, okay, everybody's talking slowly, like, okay, yeah, what's my gain from this meeting? But then for me, if you set points and someone help guide the meeting in a specific direction, so everybody can have a benefit from it, then you will not get bored.
How do you do? So my experience with Scrum is that it works well, except when you have a weak product owner. Who doesn't know exactly what they want and is not very clear about what should be the actual product in the end, or how to write it actually, so even though you may have some very capable developers. So what is your suggestion when this kind of situation happens?
Kick the product owner.
That's always a problem, though.
Yeah, we had actually my first experience was like that.
Developers,
My first experience with a product owner who's absent 90% of the time. We'd be thinking, yeah, what we're doing here, okay, learning online courses during work time because we have nothing specific to do, or we ask them like any new features coming up, and we start suggesting and brainstorming. But then, like, I think that's why I said sometimes it needs the organization's willingness to change. And then when our organization changed the whole framework, our product owner was forced to sit with us in the team, and he was forced to be there for us. Because of course, when he gets pressure from upper, then he's gonna go for it. And then he was flexible enough, and he understood it, why he needed to be there for the product. It's not for us. We're paid to be there. Even if you don't tell us to do anything, we're just sitting there. We're gonna check in, check out. Like, it's your problem. You're doing bad for your own company. It's not for us.
So let's say you get your 3 review questions, like what did you do yesterday, what are you doing today, and what are you having trouble with. So we did a Scrum project at the end of last year. It was pretty interesting. The thing that I found is like everybody fills in those details in the morning and keeps doing what they do. So there was maybe the Scrum Master wasn't doing his job, because I felt like, okay, you see this feedback and you see like this guy's having trouble doing this. And of course programmers have their egos and their personal chemistry and all that. So I kind of felt like, oh, maybe is it the Scrum Master's job to say like, look, John is having trouble with this, and I know you can help him to solve that problem. So it's sort of like, does Scrum equal squarely to management? How do you feel about it?
Actually, no.
No.
So in this example, daily stand-up, the Scrum Master should be silent unless something's gonna. So is Scrum Master, even if you know that person has this skill and he's good at this, and the other one is not, actually they should self-organize. They should help, because you cannot force someone to help something. You cannot force it.
If it's not working, would you step in? I think that's what he's asking in a sense, right? That 2 people should be able to solve it among themselves. But if you see that's not happening, do you step in as a Scrum Master, or what do you say? Yeah.
So yeah, this has happened actually in my team, and I was a developer, and I felt like because we do iOS, but also we have an Android app, and Android app is like that app that nobody wanna touch. It's very old Java code. I was like, oh, why don't you do it? Oh, you have free time today. And then everybody like, okay, who's gonna pick up this task? And it was like, I'm not here. I'm gonna run away. And then I felt like, oh, I wanna tell this guy to do it. I know he knows Java, so he should do it. But still, I was like, it can. As a developer, I knew there was something wrong. I know everybody's dreading to do that, but if I couldn't do it, I have to a little bit stimulate as a developer. It's like, oh, how about you do this? Or okay, I can do it, but I'm not like very good at this. Can you like pair program with me or help me? Yeah, so it takes some courage from someone to step up. But the thing when what Scrum says is like the Scrum Master should not force something on anybody. He's not there to force things. He's there to understand. If the problem between the team members, like something's not right, then he should feel it, and maybe, I don't know, maybe 2 colleagues not nice with each other or something. It should be solved in a different way.
Could you frame it as, for you to do it, what do you need? And then ask that person, well, I'd like someone to consult with, and I'd like this and this, and just basically getting requirements from every potential member of that task. If that's some approach. Because I don't have much experience in Scrum, but it sounds like maybe not. be useful, just to turn the tables in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Also, actually, one of these things, usually if you feel at the end that nobody wants to do this task, that maybe you need more resources. Because usually Scrum wants a team as cross-functional, but if all the team members will feel not confident enough to deal with that, then it means maybe you need someone else.
Outside.
Even if Scrum actually doesn't encourage to add and remove members the whole time because it destabilizes the team. But I think it is.
So you would think Scrum is more like it's a tool that reveals problems, not so much as like, okay, this is how you fix them, but as like let's say you were the project manager and you chose that let me use Scrum in this project, and this is how I understand what's going on, and I understand when the deadlines are met, and I understand why something is not working. So in that frame, you would think like Scrum is the thing that reveals what's going on inside the team and within the project. And then how do you actually solve the problems? It's another approach that's more like a management side conversation.
So yes, Scrum says actually there's no project manager, so the product owner also, even if it's kind of a high title it seems, but he should also be in the service of the team. So the Scrum doesn't tell you how to solve these problems, it just tells you need to be self-organized, because after all you're not in kindergarten, even if you said like developers have their own ego and their own problems, but you will have to solve it because that's what a team is. You have to all work together. Or it happened to us one time, we had a developer who was kind of reluctant to do these things and it was very hard to communicate with him. It's like, you know, when someone asks you, oh, how do I do this? And you tell him, oh, you can try this and this and this. And then he goes and he does something completely different. And then when he tries to merge, it's a conflict. And it happened so many times. At the end, the guy, he just quit. So you could feel sometimes that there's some elements, unfortunately, it doesn't fit with the harmony of the team. But yeah, what Scrum is, it doesn't exactly tell you how to solve these problems. You will have to experiment, try, and then see, you go from there. And that's why they have the sprint retrospective meeting. So this retrospective meeting is one of my favorite meetings. I call it the fun meeting. Because usually we just have fun. It's like we try to go somewhere like we have like open space and everybody just chill, eat, you know, drink, anything. And then because it takes time to people to say what their problems are. Because this meeting should be, what's your problem? What went wrong? Not technically level, but feelings, emotions, or the frustration, dealing with those type of things. So these things, for example, it should be addressed. And yeah, okay, let's try to do this and this, or let's try to do that approach. So that's what Scrum telling you. You need to inspect and adapt. So you need to always keep trying to find solutions for your own problems.
How big was the team?
I think we had like 5-6 people in it.
And
the
know
thing,
each other quite well?
thing was in the beginning, they tried to run it like there's no project manager, and then everything is 2-3 months late, and extremely tight deadline, and it's a full on chaos. And then people are just like, we'll talk about that next week or sometime, and then it's like, here's the deadline. And then how in the end how it worked, like the boss, he applied like, here is our project manager, and it became his job, and it was like a cluster of projects. It was horrible for him. But the thing is, what I felt was that I think it's hard for people from different backgrounds to adjust to an idea of like there is sort of no leadership. I kind of understand the ideal, and for these people it was sort of alien. So I think they doing the Scrum questions in the morning and having those meetings, you know, that was like, but it lots of times it like you should have your 15 minutes, but then the conversation spirals out because there are so many dependencies between here and here, and it was like challenging, like when to stop, like this is not the Scrum meeting anymore, let's break it, like you and you talk about this, you and you talk about that. So I it was really stressful, but it's not because we use Scrum. It was just because it was a clusterfuck, which sometimes happens. Yeah, but it's that was really interesting to hear your points.
Actually, we've been through this point. With my team, the point. Also, we did the daily Scrum, and actually, the first time, my previous Scrum Master told us we're gonna do a morning meeting and afternoon meeting, and we say the same things. And it's like, why we do this twice?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Like, what's the difference between like you finish 6 p.m. you finish at 7, you go back next day. What did you imaginably do in that hour? It's the same thing. He said, no, we have to do it. And then we successfully convinced him not to do the second one. And then we started to do the same, which means there were like side conversations, like, oh, I'm working on this and that. But actually, that's what Scrum says. You're not supposed to solve that in that meeting. You just say, I'm having this bug, or I'm stuck at this. Could you exact person, like, help me after this daily Scrum? Because I can be third person. I have no interest in your task. Like, I have already my own problems, and you're talking in something I have no idea. For example, I'm a Swift side, and he's a server problem, and I'm totally lost. Like, why am I standing here? Like, I just want to go back and sit, or go grab my coffee or something. So this tension and frustration starts to accumulate.
So that's how it went with us too. Like, when the time went along, I don't know if people had Scrum training, or it was just something like, this is what we're going to do now. But the long meetings became shorter, and then we might have like, okay, let's skip tomorrow's Scrum. Everybody's going to just code like motherfuckers. We'll be living at the office and going back home 4 o'clock in the morning, and then it's just like, I think the good balance between having those meeting and conversation and keeping in pace. So maybe each team will find their own pacing.
Sounds to me like a dependency-based problem. Like every project, like a tree structure.
I have a different question. You're saying that Scrum Master doesn't have any input, right?
In the daily Scrum, he should be silent.
But
it depends on the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I've had situations where I've been in a team of like 7 people, and I have in the daily meeting I have a problem with this, and they said, like, the Scrum Master said, hey, this guy had this similar problem 6 months ago. Talk to him. Like, it's not like self-organizing. It's like, well, the Scrum Master was the lead coder. He'd been there for like 12 years. He knows the code base in and out, and he knows what everyone has worked on always. So he has more information than what other people have. And so a developer, in that case, the developer was like, well, oh yeah, that's right, I did solve that six months ago. Yeah, I'll help you with that. He forgot that he'd solved it, but the Scrum Master remembered because that guy was
I think brilliant. This is a good point, because it's an advice, but it's a good advice, because he didn't tell him how to exactly solve it, but he just...
he was like, it's a daily stand-up. Everyone stand up. No, don't sit down. Stand up.
To make it shorter.
5 minutes maximum. Okay, what's this? What's this? Okay, everyone go. Problems? No, go. And then we have 3 minutes of silent time. No talking to anyone. No one was allowed to talk.
And then you're standing.
What do you mean?
Sorry?
No one was allowed to talk.
After the meeting, or
after the meeting. You have 15 minutes or half an hour after the meeting. But then, if you wanted to talk to someone else, you had to send them an email, and they had to agree.
Oh, really?
But it's like silent coding. Everyone's like, silent time. No one was allowed to interrupt anyone else unless they had previously agreed to it, and they went to a meeting.
Does that work?
Oh yeah, it was amazing. They got turned down so many times.
Yeah, I think that's
Email me. Shut up.
I think because they say supposedly the Scrum Master, that he'll remove impediments or exterior noise. So that's the focus is to give the developers the maximum time to focus on. So that's why usually they say if someone else comes from a different department and hey, they want to chat or someone, or they give them a different request, he should kick them out. So that's one way, aggressive way to do it. But if it's functional for the team, then yeah, let's be it.
So you have maybe two last questions because we need to exit soon. You go maybe after one, so just like me, just a quick question. What do you suggest for remote teams? Because communication is extremely important, right? What happens when people are in the other countries or actually in remote offices and you cannot see them typically like you would do in an office, right? Does Scrum really work with that kind of context? Or do we suggest something else?
Actually, my team also was remote. Half of it was remote before, in not completely different time zone, but there was like difference of 2 hours. We tried to cope with it with the online meetings. We tried the Hangouts. We tried so many tools, team viewers, and sometimes the noise. Sometimes they have internet cut off. Sometimes they're locked out of the office. So many problems happen, and it can be an obstacle because it causes delays in communication. Is it doable? Yes, it's doable. For the sake of the team, it's doable. If all the team members are actually committing and they have a weight in the team, they're really contributing, then all team members have to work to solve those communication problems. So basically, mostly we will do in Slack. If we cannot hear each other, we even tried the Google Hangout subscription, when someone talks and it tries in English, it's very funny, not working yet, but we tried so many tools. I think it needs the engagement and commitment from all the team members to make this work.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just follow up on that real quick, because I was on a Scrum team that I was the one remote person for most of the time. Completely agree with you. As long as everybody's bought into it and can really, you can make it work. But, yeah, it's surprisingly hard still.
Because, for example, if you're remote, and as he said, it's almost similar to what he mentioned earlier. It's like stopping all communication coming from outside. So if you're remote, then actually nobody's coming to bother you.
Right, yeah.
You're really focused on what your task is.
But what my question was, so the last team I was on with Scrum, and I feel like there were some things I really liked about it. I think the daily stand-ups worked really well. I think the retrospective was a great meeting. But, and I think with all the pointing and everything, and the velocity, I think we got a really great perspective on, at the beginning of a quarter, what can we get done in this quarter, and when can we get this much done? I feel like I had more visibility than most teams I'd ever been on. But I feel like that came at the cost of, so many meetings. There was just the sprint planning, the backlog grooming. There's just, all this time spent talking about the work that we're going to do instead of actually doing the work. And I sometimes wonder how much of there's a trade-off there, clearly. We got better visibility into what we could get done, but it always felt to me like things took longer. And I wonder if you felt that, or if you have any perspective on just, too many meetings with Scrum.
I think this type of meetings, planning meeting, it's a necessary waste of developers' time. It's necessary. Why? Because have you ever seen someone going to war without a plan? At least you have plan A, plan B. Most of the time, plan A won't work.
Swedish history from 1600, 2000, pretty much it.
So that's
we all know how it went.
Always Finn's trying to get one in on Sweden. You guys.
So exactly, some things need planning. But what you can do is make it as short as possible.
Yeah.
So sometimes, for example, one of the things I notice, people stay silent. And what are you thinking of? Let's estimate, or how much do you think? Everybody's just waiting for someone else to say something. That's why there are techniques like the poker planning game.
Yeah,
it's when someone give an estimation without the other person seeing it. It's not like you're not in school. You don't get to copycat what other people said because you don't know. If you don't know, just say I don't know, and people explain more. So to make it as fast as possible, because everybody just want to go back and work eventually, all the team has to be committed and just be engaged in the process.
All right, we have to stop this conversation here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.